I'm Evelyn, 35 years old. One quiet evening completely upended my entire world. I'd just finished what seemed like an ordinary phone call with my parents, only to realize they hadn't hung up yet. From the other end of the line came their conversation with my sister. Though the connection was a bit noisy, their words were crystal clear and utterly frank, without a hint of concealment. My father's voice was icy cold, almost numb. Living with her is just too unbearable, but we're staying, all for the sake of her money. Before I could even process those words, my sister's laughter cut through the air, sharp and dripping with sarcasm, as if she'd already known this truth all along. I clutched my phone so tightly that my knuckles ached from the force. My heart was pounding so violently it felt like it might burst right through my chest any second. The room seemed to spin around me, and my stomach churned uncontrollably, but I didn't cry, nor did I scream. I just sat there frozen, every single word carving itself into my heart like a blade. They thought I'd already hung up the phone and knew nothing about it, but little did they realize that I was listening in real time to this betrayal. Every second felt as long as a century. My parents, whom I'd trusted most deeply, hadn't treated me as their daughter at all. They'd seen me merely as an ATM. My sister's laughter echoed in my mind, each note mocking me, every sound confirming. In their eyes, I was utterly worthless. After the call ended, I sat on the sofa for a long time, staring at the phone's dark screen, replaying that moment over and over again. Has it always been like this? Were those warm words I'd heard all along merely wrapped in calculation? I couldn't find an answer, only that what I'd just heard could never be erased. Those words had become an insurmountable chasm, completely altering everything. Before I continue, I'd love to hear your stories. Have you ever uncovered a family secret that completely shattered your perception of the people closest to you? Please share your experience in the comments. I'm curious to know how you've managed to bear the weight of betrayal and what lessons it's taught you about trust. Early the next morning, I forced myself to appear calm as I brewed coffee and prepared breakfast, though inside I was already in turmoil. My hands and feet deliberately remained steady. After all, I had to hide every single emotion from them. When my father came in, he glanced furtively at the newspaper, mumbled something vague like, "Good morning," then immediately buried himself in it. He gulped down his coffee so quickly, as if he were eager to escape. My mother followed close behind, trying hard to sound cheerful as she chattered about our neighbor's new car, her hands fidgeting restlessly with the napkin. Her overly enthusiastic tone only made her artificiality more obvious. Meanwhile, Melissa stared at her phone the entire time, not even glancing at the breakfast I'd prepared. She merely hummed in response, half-heartedly. As I was clearing the dishes, I couldn't help but notice their peculiar behaviors. My father's avoidance, my mother's attempts to conceal things, and Melissa's indifference, all of which left me feeling both alienated and deeply chilled. I'd always thought we were a close-knit family. 3 years ago, after inheriting our grandfather's estate, I bought this spacious house in Lexington without hesitation, inviting them all to live with me. I took on every single mortgage payment, utility bill, and daily expense, covering everything from my mother's shopping sprees to Melissa's business failures. My father had long since retired, and my mother had never worked, yet I never once complained. I'd always firmly believed this was exactly how a family should be, pouring my heart and soul into ensuring they lived comfortably. But now, looking back, I realized that my father frequently probed my savings and investments, my mother deliberately encouraged me to shoulder extra expenses, and Melissa took advantage of our generosity without ever lifting a finger to help herself. Every single detail from those days revealed nothing but calculation and self-interest. As I scrubbed the pot, I jotted down these suspicions in my notebook. Though my heart was filled with sharp pain, my resolve to uncover the truth only grew stronger. Later that evening, I caught Melissa glancing furtively at my laptop, which I'd left open on the counter. As soon as I stepped into the kitchen, she quickly closed the laptop and mumbled something about just checking the weather. My gut told me something was seriously off. I went through the motions of my daily life, driving to the software company, coding away during meetings, but my mind had already drifted far away. I thought back to last Christmas, when I'd given my mother a new coat she'd long admired. She'd hugged me tightly, calling me her rock. Yet now, those words sounded hollow and insincere. My father had patted me on the shoulder then, saying he was proud of my success, but was it really pride or pure greed? I'd secretly slipped Melissa some money to cover business expenses, yet she hardly said a word of thanks. I thought I was helping, but maybe, deep down, I'm just their permanent source of free meals. In the evening, I sit in my room, scrolling through my notes on my phone, and add another entry. Melissa peeked at my laptop today. I haven't confronted them yet. What I need isn't just suspicion. I'll keep observing patiently, waiting for the right moment, digging deeper into the truth. They think I'm clueless, but I've been wide awake all along. This house, my house, is no longer a home. It's become a stage, and I no longer want to play along with their little drama. Starting on Wednesday, I began paying close attention to details I'd previously overlooked. My father has been repeatedly testing my financial situation. Those sharp questions now sound utterly calculated. Last week he asked about my work bonus. The month before he probed my savings, and this morning, during breakfast, he casually mentioned his investment accounts, his evasive gaze betraying nothing but greed. I forced myself to appear calm and changed the subject, but the air was suddenly thick with an oppressive heaviness. My mother wasn't much better off either. In the afternoon, she came home carrying shopping bags stuffed with designer handbags and silk scarves, among them a pair of shoes that actually equaled my monthly car payment. Yet she casually dismissed it as a little gift, even laughing as she defended herself. "You work so hard. We deserve to treat ourselves a bit." Those words pierced me like needles, but thinking of our family bond, I ultimately couldn't bring myself to expose her. What was most outrageous was Melissa. After being unemployed for months, she'd been lying all along, claiming her business was on hold, but in reality, she spent her days sprawled lazily on the sofa, scrolling endlessly through her phone, showing absolutely no interest in finding a job. When I asked her about the progress on her design project, she didn't even lift her head, just mumbled something dismissive like, "I'm too busy." I clearly remembered how, back then, when she begged me to lend her money to start her own business, I'd handed over the cash without a second thought. Now, all I felt was deep disappointment. That evening, I dug out the bills from our home office, the utility bills, credit card charges, all were registered under my name. As I carefully went through them, I started spotting all sorts of shady dealings. Charges from steak restaurants I'd never been to, receipts for luxury clothing I'd never bought, and even subscriptions to streaming services from unfamiliar providers. With trembling hands, I spread out the receipts. My mother's shopping bags, my father's subtle probing, and Melissa's laziness all intertwined together in my mind. I'd once shouldered all household expenses without reservation, just so my family could live comfortably, never once thinking of holding back or keeping track of every penny. Yet these unexplained expenditures felt like a slap across the face, jolting me awake. The warmth and affection of our past family moments kept surfacing, and how I wished it were all just a misunderstanding. But the more evidence piled up, the clearer it became. They'd never really loved me. They'd only ever loved my money. Although I didn't yet have any concrete proof, this growing sense of unease was already suffocating me. Later that week, I caught my mother secretly slipping a credit card statement into her bag. When she noticed me staring, she hastily tried to explain it away as just tidying up the papers, but I didn't believe a word of it. At dinner, Melissa complained about her phone lagging and hinted at wanting a new one. My father immediately chimed in, saying that since I had good financial means, I ought to help her out. I forced a stiff smile and replied, "I'll think about it," then got up and went back to my room. In my notebook, I scribbled down, "Mother hiding bills, Melissa asking for a new phone, Father putting pressure on me." I'm well aware that I don't yet have solid evidence, so I hesitate to confront them rashly. On Friday, I was alone in my office, my mind flooded with memories of how they'd repeatedly urged me to spend money. Last summer, I paid the full cost of a family vacation to the Great Smoky Mountains, something my mother insisted on, and she casually dismissed it as a way to strengthen our bond. My father, citing financial hardship, asked me to cover the car repair bill, and without a second thought, I transferred several $1,000s. Melissa kept asking for money under the guise of starting her own business. I funded her website development, fabric purchases, and marketing efforts, all to no avail. These memories felt like towering walls, separating the family I once knew from the harsh truth. I could no longer stay in the office, so I immediately got into my car and drove straight to see my friend Christine. She was already waiting for me at a coffee shop. As soon as I sat down, I laid it all out. The betrayal of not having hung up the phone, the greed of my family members. Christine took my hand tightly and said bluntly, "This is terrifying. You shouldn't have to put up with this." She urged me to gather evidence and protect myself. Her words dispelled my confusion, and as I left, I finally felt a sense of relief. On the drive home, I began to sort through my past. My parents had always favored Melissa. While I worked part-time jobs to pay for college and stayed up late coding, she squandered her time and resources thanks to her family's support. I'd thought buying a house would bring me equality, but in reality, it was just their safety net. This realization only made me more determined. Back home, I immediately logged into my bank account, pulled up the statements from the past 6 months, and carefully reviewed every single transaction, resolving to uncover the truth behind each one. On my phone, I created a new evidence notebook, firmly convinced that if they really were taking advantage of me, there'd be traces left behind. Over the weekend, I logged into my bank account again. The home office was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of my laptop running. I stared at the financial dashboard, a dashboard I'd neglected for far too long. I'd been shouldering all the expenses, the mortgage, utility bills, my mother's shopping sprees, even Melissa's startup funds, but I'd never once taken the time to scrutinize exactly where the money was going. Now, I'm going through the transaction records one by one, and my mood grows heavier with each entry. There it is, dozens of transfers, all from my savings account to an account I've never heard of. For months on end, thousands of dollars have been transferred out, one after another, with notes reading consulting fee or miscellaneous expenses. I checked the dates of the transfers. Some happened precisely when Melissa was pitching me her new ideas for her clothing brand, while others coincided with times when my mother was buying little gifts. My parents do have access to my secondary account, which they use to cover household expenses, but this time it's different. They didn't ask for my permission. Not even once did they mention it to me. I keep scrolling down, and my fingers start to tremble. Last month there was a transfer of $4,000, and 2 weeks ago, another transfer of $2,500. I opened the account details and discovered that the recipient was a company registered under Melissa's name, the very failed fashion startup my sister had been so sure would soon be back on track. Turns out, that business she'd sworn up and down was about to relaunch had been quietly sustaining itself entirely on my money all along. I leaned back in my chair, and the truth hit me like a slap across the face. They weren't just squandering my money. They were secretly siphoning off my inheritance to fuel her unrealistic dreams. A wave of nausea washed over me, and my heart felt utterly betrayed. But I needed to hear them admit it themselves. On Sunday morning, I found my mother chopping vegetables in the kitchen, preparing lunch. I tried to keep my voice calm and casual as I asked, "Mom, I just checked the bank statement and noticed a few large transfers. Do you know what's going on?" Her knife froze midair, suspended in the air for a moment before she quickly forced a strained smile. "Oh, those? Just some gifts for Melissa, helping her get back on her feet." Her gaze darted away, refusing to meet my eyes. She just kept staring at the countertop. "A gift." I took a step forward and pressed her further. "A gift worth thousands of dollars, yet you've never so much as asked me about it?" She let out a nervous, forced smile. "Evelyn, don't make a big deal out of nothing. We're family, after all. We're supposed to share things with each other, aren't we?" Her tone was light and casual, but it was nothing more than an excuse, a lie cloaked in warmth. I nodded, pretending to believe her words, though my mind was churning with thoughts. What was she hiding? And I'd never trust her again. I hadn't yet confronted my father or Melissa. I needed to be absolutely sure, to protect what was mine. That afternoon, I drove to a local branch of a bank in Lexington. A kind, glasses-wearing female teller helped me open a new savings account, a secure account accessible only to me. As I sat in her office signing documents, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Melissa. "Can we talk about my next collection?" I ignored it, focusing instead on the papers in front of me. When I got home, I logged into my bank account again and transferred half of my inheritance, several $100,000, the fortune I'd inherited from my grandfather, to the new account. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been taken away. I changed the passwords for all my other accounts and removed my parents from my secondary accounts. They'd figure it out soon enough, but by then, I'd be ready. On Sunday evening, I sat at my desk, staring at the balance in my new account. The money I'd transferred to Melissa's company hadn't been an accidental oversight. It had been a deliberate betrayal, a carefully orchestrated plot hatched behind my back. And Mother's lie about the gift only confirmed it further. I've countless times trusted them, handing over money without a second thought, convinced that we were family. But only now do I finally understand the truth. They've been taking advantage of me all along, and Melissa was in on it too. My resolve has only grown stronger. I'm not just protecting my money anymore. I'm protecting myself. I opened my notebook and added one last entry. My mother lied about the transfer. They're stealing my money. I don't know how I'll face them, but I do know that soon enough, I'll have answers. Sunday dinner started off fairly normal until I opened my mouth. The restaurant was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken, and as my mother passed me the mashed potatoes, the plates clinked together with a crisp, clear sound. My father was slicing meat, his knife moving smoothly and with steady strength, while Melissa sat with her head down, scrolling through her phone and barely touching her food. I sat across from them, my fork resting on the plate, my heart pounding wildly. I've been preparing for this all day, rehearsing the words over and over in my mind. The evidence, the bank transfer records, the lies, the hidden bills, had piled up in my mind like a stack of playing cards. I couldn't eat a thing, and I could no longer keep up the pretense. I set down my napkin, took a deep breath, and said, "I heard your call last week. You didn't hang up. I know exactly what you really think of me." The silence at the dinner table was deafening. My father's knife froze midair. My mother's smile froze on her face. Even Melissa's phone slipped from her lap onto her thigh. "What are you talking about, Evelyn?" my mother asked, her voice sharp and trembling. I kept my gaze locked firmly on her. "You said living with me was terrible, but you had no choice but to stay, just for my money." Melissa let out a snort, as if it were the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Dad cleared his throat and put down his knife and fork. "That was just a casual remark, honey." His tone was unnaturally gentle, almost as if he were soothing a child. "We didn't mean it that way." Mom quickly nodded in agreement. "We were just joking, Evelyn. You know we love you." Their words sounded rehearsed, hollow, just like lines from a poorly written script. I turned to Melissa, waiting for her response. She stared at her plate for a moment, then let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "You're making such a big deal out of nothing," she said, rolling her eyes. That laugh, that expression, exactly the same as the one on the phone, fired up my anger in an instant. I slammed my chair back, leaping to my feet. "Making a joke? Then explain this. How come thousands of dollars were transferred into your company's account without my consent?" Mom's face turned deathly pale in an instant, and Dad's jaw tightened up too. "It was all for the sake of the family," Mom stammered. "We thought you'd be willing to help." I interrupted her. "Help? You're lying, Mom. When I asked you, you said it was a gift. I trusted all of you, but you've been taking advantage of me the whole time." Melissa let out a cold laugh and crossed her arms. "Evelyn, you're just way too controlling, always acting as if you're somehow better than the rest of us." Her words hit me like a knife, but I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone, opened a social media app, pulled up a screenshot, and held it up in front of them. "Controlling? Like this post you just shared?" The screenshot showed a public post Melissa had made, calling me stingy, controlling, and obsessed with money. "I just discovered this post this morning." Mom gasped sharply, and Dad looked away. The mockery on Melissa's face vanished in an instant. I flung my phone onto the table, and a screenshot suddenly leaped into their eyes. I've seen the transfer records, heard your lies, and even read this post. I'm never going to be your ATM again. Dad tried to defend himself once more, his voice rising slightly. Evelyn, calm down. We're family. We didn't mean any harm. But I was beyond calm now. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't laugh behind your back. I glanced at each of them in turn. Dad's eyes filled with guilt, Mom's hands trembling, and Melissa's defiant gaze unyielding. I want you all out of this house, every single one of you, and leave by tomorrow. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate with a loud clang. You're not serious, are you? She whispered. Melissa burst into laughter again. This time, her laughter was laced with bitterness. Have a great time all by yourself, Evelyn. You'll miss us. I didn't flinch. I'll take care of myself just fine. I'll pack up your things and get them out of here. They sat there, utterly stunned, while I turned around and walked into my own room. My heart was racing, yet my steps felt strangely steady. I'd given them everything. My home, my money, my trust, but they'd thrown it all back in my face. Melissa's post had been the final straw, proving once and for all that she'd never seen me as a sister at all, just another resource to be exploited. I locked the door behind me, sat down on the bed, opened my notebook, and wrote, They're leaving. I'm free. This house still belongs to me, and I'll make sure it always does. They might still try to talk their way out of it, but I've had enough. On Monday morning, the house felt utterly empty. The dining table where I'd confronted them last night now stood bare, no plates, no lingering sounds. Father, Mother, and Melissa had packed their bags and left before dawn. As they dragged their suitcases out the door, I stayed in my room, deliberately avoiding any goodbyes. Walking through the living room, I noticed the empty spaces. Mother's favorite blanket was gone. Father's reading glasses that he'd always left on the coffee table were nowhere to be found, and Melissa's charger no longer lay tangled messily on the sofa. From snippets of conversations between Mother and her friends, I learned that they'd moved into a small rental apartment on the other side of Lexington. The silence in the house was suffocating yet strangely liberating, like shedding a weight that had been bearing down on me for far too long. As I brewed coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Mother. We're so sorry. We never meant to hurt you. Can we talk? Honey, you're overreacting. Let's work this out together. Melissa's message was even shorter. You don't have to kick us out. Just give me a call back. Their words felt like a rope, tugging at that corner deep inside me that still longed for the warmth of family. But now I'd seen right through them. Those apologies came way too quickly, way too deliberately, almost as if they were just trying to reel me back in. I put down my phone and didn't reply to their messages. By dinner time, I'd had more than enough of their excuses, more than enough of their feeble jokes and their hollow talk about family unity. I'd never fall for it again. Around noon, I found myself sitting in a small law office downtown, a place my colleague had recommended. The lawyer was a sharp-eyed woman, her notebook in hand, listening intently as I recounted the details of the bank transfers, the lies, and that social media post. You need to protect your assets, she said, jotting down key points in her notebook. We'll draft an injunction to prevent them from gaining further unauthorized access to your accounts and review the ownership of your property. I nodded, signed the necessary documents, and set the legal process in motion. My house, my inheritance, everything was mine, and I'd make sure no one could ever lay a finger on it again. The lawyer's calm and efficient demeanor put me at ease, reminding me that I was in control of the situation, rather than merely reacting passively. When I got home, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the spot where my mother used to chop vegetables, at the very place where Melissa used to scroll through her phone. Freedom felt real. I could finally breathe easy, free from their judgment and demands. Yet deep down, my heart ached faintly for all we'd lost. I thought about the time my father taught me how to ride a bike, how my mother baked me a birthday cake, even the memory of Melissa braiding my hair when she was little. Those moments now seem so distant, tainted by their betrayal. I didn't cry, but the pain weighed heavily on my heart. silently reminding me that the family I once thought I had no longer existed. I opened my laptop, checked my new bank account, and saw the balance I'd managed to protect. This wasn't just money, it was my future, and I'd fight tooth and nail to secure it. 6 months later, I moved into a new apartment. The place was smaller than the old house in Lexington, but every corner felt entirely mine. It was clean, quiet, and utterly free of secrets. I'd sold the old house and made a good sum of money, then reorganized my life exactly as I wanted. My days revolved around coding projects, late-night debugging sessions, and sipping coffee, no longer burdened by the heavy weight of family conflicts. Finally, I'm living for myself, no longer bound by anyone else's expectations. One evening, Kristen came over to see me, bringing takeout and a playlist of old songs we used to listen to back in college. "This place really suits you, Evelyn," she said with a smile. Together, we unpacked the noodles on our new sofa. We laughed as we talked about work and her latest design client. No heavy confessions, no need for advice. This was pure friendship. Effortless and genuine, a kind of connection I'd almost forgotten. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that my father and mother were doing just fine. They were scraping by in a rented apartment, long gone from their days of lavish dinners and designer handbags. My dad had found a part-time job at a hardware store, while my mom was selling her old jewelry online to help pay the bills. Without my financial support, their life had completely fallen apart. I didn't feel any sense of vindication. Instead, it just felt so distant, as if those people were merely characters in a story I'd long since put behind me. Melissa's fate was even worse. Her social media post, in which she accused me of being controlling and stingy, ended up coming back to haunt her. Friends and fans alike began to condemn her selfishness, and her already shaky fashion business finally collapsed completely after the last investor pulled out. I watched as her social media accounts grew silent. No more selfies. No more posts promoting her entrepreneurial ventures. All that remained was a faint echo of the image she'd once worked so hard to project. Looking back now, I've learned to trust my intuition. That uneasy feeling I'd been suppressing for years? It was right all along. For too long, I'd let myself be blinded by love, convinced that family meant unconditional loyalty. But loyalty doesn't mean turning a blind eye to lies, nor does it mean letting others drain you dry. Protecting my values, my money, my peace of mind, and my boundaries has been the hardest yet most right choice I've ever made. Thank you to everyone who's listened to my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Please leave a comment below, and let's have an honest conversation.